was shopping at a flea market looking for some old cartoons when I came across a particular seller with a lovely selection. I'm a big fan of Popeye the Sailor Man, Betty Boop cartoons, and the occasional Disney short from the 1920s to 30s, and she had many of these as well as some things I had never heard of. She was an elderly woman, wild hair but a kind face. She smelled strongly of perfume and the typical old people smell. You know the one. I made small talk with her. Her scratchy but gentle voice kept my attention. I asked her about the discs and VHS tapes. She gave sometimes useful and sometimes not so useful answers. There was this one CD that had the words Cammy Candy, Secret Sweetheart, written in red marker. I was curious, so I asked the old woman what it was, to which she explained that her son had gotten that from a friend of his, but now he had moved out and had said she could sell his old cartoons. I made small talk, bought my things, then took them home with me. I spent that same night enjoying my spoils when that CD came to my mind again. I had my snacks in place and heated blanket on high considering it was cold that night. I checked over the CD. The disc was a little scratched, but nothing too bad, so I cleaned it up then popped it in my DVD player. I sat on my couch pressing play while I swaddled myself in my blanket. The episode played a cutesy, upbeat song. It seemed old, definitely a 30s cartoon judging by the sound quality and lack of color. Then she popped on screen. Cammy Candy was sitting cutely by the title card of the episode. She was adorable, blowing a kiss our way and giving a little wave. The episode starting with her getting dressed. I had not expected to see such pin-up-like shots. I had recalled Betty Boop cartoons doing a similar thing, though not being so bold. She was singing a little song about how love was in the air, and she hoped to find a boyfriend soon, since it was nearing Valentine's Day. She had gotten dressed when she heard a knock at the door. The animation was very good as she hurried along to meet whomever was knocking on her door. She opens the door, and whoever it is at her residence has been obstructed, though their hand comes into the frame and offers her a letter, as well as a rose. She cheerfully accepts them both, giving whoever came to the door a tip, then closing it as the hand retreated along with the closing door. She sat down in her plush chair to read out a love letter written by a secret admirer, jumping for joy as she sang a short reprise about having found a boyfriend before realizing she didn't actually know who it was. I missed a bit when I got a text from somebody, but didn't go back considering it was an unimportant scene of her doling up and then rushing out the door after doing some chores that had your typical living room furniture jokes expected of a rubber hose style cartoon. Cammy held her rose, sniffing it as couples and men passed by, fawning over her as she pondered who it could be. She started stopping single men to ask if it was them who sent her the rose, but they either apologized and denied it or took it as an opportunity to flirt with her, which earned them a stern talking or smack. I took this chance to take a picture of her. We soon cut to later that night, when she is talking with a male friend of hers inside her little house. He appeared to be a man with some kind of cake for a head. Apparently his name was Edgar. He just comforted her, smiling in a calming way as she tearfully spoke about how she couldn't find the man who sent her the rose. He suggested some people, but she shook her head, telling him about how they confirmed that they did not send the rose. He thought for a bit more before a worried look came upon his face. He bit his lip as he nervously looked at the rose. Cammy seemed confused at his expression, then asked, "What's with the face?" He rubs the back of his neck before saying, "There is One person you haven't asked." He trailed off as she leans forward. "Who is it? Who is it?" she asks in an excitable manner. Her excitement is soon dulled when her friend says the name he is thinking of. "Salem Crow Circle," he whispered, to which he earned a light flick to the nose. It appeared to be a strawberry nose. "Don't joke like that. You'll make me faint." He chuckled but kept frowning while saying, "I'm not joking, no. He's the only one we haven't seen yet." And so they decided to go see him along with another friend of theirs named Silas. Cammy, Edgar, and Silas proceeded down a spooky forest. I had sat up, shoveling some popcorn into my mouth as I watched in suspense. Cammy was the main focus, losing her friends in the thick fog that seemed to be prevalent in the creepy forest. Silas dicked around and made rude, crude jokes to his friends. He teased and pissed them off, but they seemed to love him regardless. She bumped into someone, apologizing before looking up, then yelping when she saw their face. We got a look as well, and it appeared we had found Salem. He had a French plague doctor's mask on, of which he removed to reveal a rather disheveled-looking man with a crystal ball for a head. It was cracked, scratched, and broken. He was cloaked in black and towered over Cammy, though Cammy already appeared to be a smaller character, so compared to her, he looked monstrous. "What are you doing here?" Salem spoke gently, but his voice was deep. It startled me a little, surely from the unexpected tone. Cammy stammered on about how she was wondering if he had sent her the rose and letter. He politely asked for the rose, then proceeded to inspect it, while he delicately rolled it between his claws, placing it back into her hands in a gentlemanly and tender manner. He knelt to her level, shaking his head before stating, "You have caught the eyes of someone who is not of this world. It appears a dangerous creature has been charmed by you, Miss Candy. I advise you leave this forest before you are harmed. This is no place for a sugary woman to be wandering about with some equally sweet friends. You are all bound to be harmed in some way." Cammy looked startled as she stared into Salem's tired eyes. They were glazed, suggesting that he was hard of seeing. A sound off-screen caught all of our attention. He put the mask back on, looking behind him, then stood up. "Who goes there?" Salem called out into the darkness to find Edgar hurrying over to them with something on him. I heard heavy weeping from him. Whoever was voice acting for him had done an excellent job in making him sound as if he had seen something beyond horrific. I believed at the time that this was some kind of Halloween episode. I still have my theories. Cammy cried out, running to Edgar, then panicked when she saw him soaked in something dark. She turned to Salem, who was walking towards them. Cammy screamed that Edgar was covered in blood. Edgar was sobbing profusely, shaking. The events were loud enough that I turned my volume down to avoid neighbors believing someone was getting murdered in my home. Salem led them out of the forest, then returned to it, presumably to go find Silas. Cammy wept profusely as Edgar told her about how he had been searching for Silas when he slipped and fell in blood. He had tried following the trail, but it had led to a dead end. I was now very interested. This was not your typical 30s cartoon. This was very adult and very dark, and I was starting to enjoy it. I didn't think much of it, as I had seen old adult cartoons and assumed this was of the same breed of show from that era. Cammy had left Edgar to go find Silas. I had not been fond of Silas, as he had been a dick in all 3 minutes we got to know him, so I was hoping they wouldn't find him. Cammy ended up going into a cave. Upon reaching the end, She pulled out some matches and attempted to light them. She soon succeeded, only to end up screaming and crying as she saw Silas's viscera crudely strewn out before her in the shape of a heart. I stared in awe. Someone had expertly shaded and drawn his organs and body parts in great detail. I have seen a great deal of Adult Swim in your typical edgy horror videos, but I had never seen something like this from this era. She choked and sobbed as she stared in horror. She started to realize pieces were missing, then opted to find them so he could have a proper burial. He always wanted an open casket funeral. She choked through tears as she searched the cave, then came to find his organs were all in some sort of romantic art aimed towards her. I felt something in my stomach twist. Not sickness, but like my insides were burning up. She viewed in horror as she passed his heart nailed to a wall with the words, "My heart bleeds for you," carved below it. She collected it, then proceeded on to see his eyes hanging on the wall with the words, "You're the only one I see," carved around them. She collected those, then hurried along. She reached his appendix, of which made her look angry as she read, "They are useless and easily removable." She fumed tearfully as she finally got to the brain. "You are forever brilliant, unique." She was backing away when she bumped into someone once again. "Salem?" she whimpered. She looked up and came face to face with the decaying face of a nameless character. He appeared to be some kind of skeletal, horned animal, but I wasn't sure what as his horns appeared splintered and broken. She screamed, but her scream was muffled by a hand. The creature explained how he had done this for her. "You are everything I have ever wanted. Beautiful, obedient. I desire you strongly." He sounded desperate as this nameless creature nuzzled her cheek in a possessive manner. "Be mine, Camilla Candy, and I will allow your friend to live. Deny me, and he will die," he said as he tugged her fluffy hair as if he was threatening to rip it out. I started noticing Cammie's expression go from upset to a slow, boiling rage. I felt similarly, though I didn't know why. Feeling my hands angrily grip the cushion of my chair through clenched teeth, I felt myself jump as Cammie whipped around, then bit down in his hand. It came out of nowhere as the creature released her, screaming in agony. The screen proceeded to do a close-up of her face. I stared in awe, looking at the realism in Cammie's face, as well as her animated breathing and spittle. She then proceeded to lunge at him, then bite his neck. She tore his throat wide open. I actually felt a little sick as she maliciously tore this man apart. By the time it was over, she stood up and wiped her mouth, looking to the organs on the ground. She collected her friend's pieces and left the cave, carrying his corpse along with her. Salem found her in the fog, escorting her and Edgar out of the forest as quickly as possible. The ambulance was there, the episode ending with Cammie sitting in the hospital. Edgar praised her for being brave, then kissed her forehead in a brotherly manner, to which she proceeded to cry softly into her hands, while Edgar did his best to comfort her. "Oh, Eddie, I did something I could never forgive myself for." She wept softly while he tried to tell her otherwise, but she stopped him and whispered, "I murdered him. And the worst part is, I'd do it again, and I know it." The episode ended with Edgar staring at the weeping woman in his arms until it blacked out to the end card. There was no end music, just a silent image saying, "The end," beside Cammie in a hospital gown, looking distraught. Now, you would think the story ends there, but it doesn't. I wasn't afraid of the episode. I was curious. I tried to find a creator, but none were listed whatsoever. Nothing came up about this curious animation. I went the next morning to find that old lady's booth at the flea market and got the number of her son, since she told me he would likely be able to answer my questions better than she could. When I called him, he was understandably confused until I introduced myself and told him what I had called about. Cammy Candy? He had responded to my query with a question to himself before the memory hit. Oh, you mean the cartoon? I loved it as a teen. Cammy was my favorite cartoon to watch. So you bought it for my grandmother? I spoke with him and learned the following. Cammy Candy was a cartoon from the 30s, created by a couple of beginning cartoonists in their basement. Apparently, they had wanted to take a more adult approach to cartooning, but were told they could not air it. It became an underground thing that was passed around secretly, and has continued being a secret to pay homage to her creators and the legacy they left behind. He told me other silly facts like how she was 20 and she was made of cotton candy. But then I told him about the episode I had watched, which made him go silent. You watched Secret Sweetheart? Did you watch it alone? He sounded anxious. I replied yes, and he breathed a sigh of relief before telling me, bury it somewhere, in the forest, get rid of the damn thing. I don't know what the creators did to that fucking thing, but whatever it was, it made my friend lose his shit. He had attacked some guys who had been pissing him off at a bar and was arrested. I don't know what will happen to you, but please, get rid of it. I'm so sorry. I should have thrown it out. I completely forgot about the damn thing. That was the last episode in this series. I thought he was batshit crazy for a bit before realizing he probably was just trying to wrap his head around his friend's outburst. It happens to the best of us. So I cut him off during his little rant about how upset he was that he hadn't destroyed it himself, and then I thanked him for his time before hanging up. I looked over the disc, then stored it away, going to bed for that night. I had enough craziness for one night after all. I had slept through most of the night when I heard a noise in my living room. I grabbed a bat and proceeded down the steps, calling out that I was armed, and whoever had broken in better leave. I spotted the intruder holding a knife and stealing some family heirlooms. My parents were no longer with us, and my brother was in the hospital, so seeing him holding all I had left of them just set something off inside me. I glared at him and demanded he return what he stole, or there would be trouble. He laughed it off, asking me what I'd do with a bat when he had a knife. If the night couldn't get worse, he took a picture of my family, then threw it on the ground. I knew he wanted to fight. He wanted to blow off steam, and I was his punching bag he wanted to blow it off on. I wasn't having it, so I looked him dead in the eyes and slammed my bat into his hand as hard as I could. The moment he dropped the knife, I felt myself lunge forward. I blacked out the moment I felt air, but when I came to, I was caked with something dark and sticky, while everything smelled like copper. I hurriedly turned on the lights to see the man I had torn the throat out of, then immediately panicked. I took a quick shower, packed my shit, and left. I know it's only a matter of time before they find me, so I beg of you, if you find this, and if that CD goes back on the market, don't watch it. Bury it. Hide it. I don't care. Something is wrong with it. I know I'd do it again if I could. I'd kill that man again, and that show had something to do with this malicious, vengeful rage I'm now feeling coursing through my veins. I just know that somehow, someway, it made me do what I did, and that alone is more terrifying than what I watched on that screen that night. I have become more terrifying than what I had been so eager to witness just hours before. My mother always said that cartoons made you cruel, made you violent, in a way. She was right.